You have to be out of your mind if you can say with your whole chest that you think affirmative action should be struck down for fairness reasons, right? Because we should live in a meritocracy, without also having the same conviction, the same passion, the same belief that legacy admissions should be done away with too. But that's exactly what Edward Bloom did, the man behind the Supreme Court decision that made affirmative action unconstitutional in universities across America. And I'm about to read him for fucking filth, because he might have won in the court of law, but I'm gonna make sure that the internet knows how much of a loser he actually is. Now, Edward Bloom is not a student. He's not a lawyer. He's not the head of an organization. He's just a man who is so horny, so committed to ending affirmative action that he's been at this for the last 3 decades. Homeboy has filed more than 24 lawsuits against affirmative action practices and, just for funsies, voting rights legislation as well. And his whole shtick is that affirmative action is reverse racism and we should live in a meritocracy and unfair. Okay, if you were that concerned about fairness, you would have gone after legacy admissions first, as no group stands to benefit more from university admission preferences than white people. Almost every elite colleges give significant legs up to children of alumni, athletes, faculty, and donors, collectively known as ALDCs. And according to data produced by the plaintiffs in this very suit, Harvard admitted 34% of legacy applicants compared to an overall admissions rate of 4.6%. About 43% of white students at Harvard are ALDC, okay? So this is not about fairness, this is about white supremacy. And if you don't think it is, let me change your mind. In 2016, Edward Bloom found a young woman by the name of Abigail Fisher to be the face of his latest lawsuit against affirmative action. Abigail Fisher sued the University of Texas for being unfairly rejected because she was the wrong color. Now, it's true that students with lower scores than Abigail got in. However, according to ProPublica, only 5 of those students were Black or Hispanic. Do you want to know how many white students with worse grades than Abigail got into the University of Texas that year? 42. Do you want to know how many students with as good grades or better grades than Abigail who were Black or Hispanic didn't get in that year at the University of Texas? 168. Edward Bloom knew this and chose to admit it. Do you understand what I mean now, that this is not about reverse racism, this is about white supremacy? Now, this time around, Edward Bloom chose to make Asian Americans the face of his latest lawsuit against affirmative action. That's right. He decided, let's not pit the whites against the non-whites, let's pit the minorities against the minorities. And it worked. The argument that was made was that Black, Indigenous, and Latinx students were essentially stealing the spots of white and Asian American students, conveniently ignoring that trust fund babies and Nepo babies are the biggest fucking culprits. You're done, Edward. You cannot convince me for a second that you give a fuck about fairness. You cannot convince me that you give a fuck about Asian Americans. You are simply mad because you don't think that white people should have to suffer for the wrongdoings of previous generations. And if you want to believe that, that's fine. But what you need to accept is that white people cannot continue to benefit from the wrongdoings of previous generations. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. So what do we do now? I think the smartest thing for Harvard to do, and I think for universities to do in general, is to abolish legacy admissions. I think that we should send the message that, okay, if white people shouldn't be at a disadvantage for the generational trauma that has been inflicted on underrepresented minorities, they shouldn't stand to benefit from it either. If universities don't do this, I mean, that's fucking embarrassing.